Good morning, everybody. I'd like to follow up the beautiful gathering music there to introduce Brent Geyer to you. He's filling in for Stearns while Stearns is away. Sorry, I have to read off my phone. Welcome to the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Welcome to our spirituality alive, inclusive, and gesture-centered community. We are so glad you're here today. If you are a newcomer, we invite you to join us for our upcoming Getting to Know UU class on Saturday, December 4th from 10 to 2. This is an opportunity to hear more about Unitarian Universalism, our history, our theologies, and our community in particular, and how to get involved. Lunch will be provided. You can register by emailing welcome@muuf.org with your name, your email, and your dietary restrictions or preferences. I have a few announcements to share with you. First, I want to remind everyone that today is the last day for the service auction. There are events and items to bid on for children and adults in the terrace room. You can sign up between now and 1 p.m. here on site, or you can bid online at www.togetherauction.com/MUUF until 7 p.m. today. Second, following the first service, so now, there is a pre-K through 6th grade parents meeting with our religious educator, Nick Wahlberg, on the terrace. Third, our endowment committee is delighted to share good news. Do you have a dream for the fellowship or see a need at MUUF that should be addressed? At our annual meeting in June, the membership approved the potential disbursement of up to $12,000 from the endowment fund this fiscal year to fund small special projects to enhance the mission of the fellowship. The grants will be awarded February 1st. Look for application info in the email blast. Fourth, I'd like to call Carolyn Schwartz forward to share an invitation. Is Carolyn here? Sorry, I can't see. Okay.
Here, I'll do it quickly.
Thank you.
Just because I see Carolyn's, she'll be at the second service. Many of you fondly remember Don Price. He hosted the Lunch Bunch for decades. Now Carolyn Schwartz is taking it back up. So every Sunday, except for the Odyssey Sundays, there will be everyone is welcome at the Florin Park Diner at 12:45 to have lunch and fellowship. That's the announcement.
Thank you, Allison. Finally, we are delighted to welcome back Charles Loflin, who served as our ministerial intern for 2 years. Charles is now the executive director of UU Faith Action, which is a collaborative legislative ministry of our New Jersey UU congregations. And he has brought with him
Laura Kushner.
Thank you, Laura Kushner, who is going to be doing our Time for All Ages today. And Laura is the ministerial intern for UU Faith Action. Welcome one and all on this justice-centered morning. And now Charles is going to light our chalice. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. There are a couple of announcements that I skipped. The first is, as you may have been handed these orange or yellow slips on the way in. Those are pod definers, another terrific vocabulary word from COVID. So please place those to either side of whatever your pod is, where you're sitting. And the final thing is that because we're sitting inside today, We are going to hum rather than sing the hymns, but the words are in your order of service, and please follow along.
Good morning. Again, my name is Laura Kushner. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the UU Faith Action New Jersey ministerial intern. And I'm pleased to be here with you this morning and happy to read the story for all ages. And this is The Agreement by Barry Lopez. One time, before there were any people walking around this valley, there were bear people. They had an agreement with the salmon. The salmon would come upriver every fall, and the bears would acknowledge this and take what they needed. This is the way it was with everything. Everyone lived by a certain agreement and courtesies. But the salmon people and the bear people had no agreement with the river. It had been overlooked. No one thought it was necessary. Well, it was. One fall, the river pulled itself back into the shore trees and wouldn't let the salmon enter the ocean. Whenever they would try, the river would pull back, leaving the salmon stranded on the sand. There was a long argument and a lot of talk. Finally, the river let the salmon enter. But when the salmon got up into the country where the bear lived, the river began to run in two directions at once, north on one side, south on the other, roaring, heaving white water and rolling big boulders up the banks. Then the river suddenly still. The salmon were afraid to move. The bear were standing behind the trees looking out. The river said in the middle of the silence that there had to be an agreement. No one could just do something whenever they wanted. You couldn't just take someone for granted. So for several days they spoke about it. The salmon said who they were, and where they came from, and the bear spoke about what they did and the powers they had been given, and the river spoke about its agreement with the rain and the wind and the crayfish, and so on. Everybody said what they needed and what they would give away. Then a very odd thing happened. The river said it loved the salmon. No one had ever said anything like that before. No one had taken this chance. It was an honesty that pleased everyone. It made for a very deep agreement among them. Well, they were able to reach an understanding about their obligations to each other, and everyone went their way. This remains unchanged. Time has nothing to do with this. This is not a story. When you feel the river shuddering against your legs, you are feeling the presence of all these agreements.
During our offertory today, Brent is going to be playing The Water is Wide, a traditional folk song. Today's offering is a dedicated collection, which means we're giving 100% to UU Faith Action New Jersey. You can donate at the text to give number 73256 with keyword MUUF, M-U-U-F, followed by the dollar amount. You can also give by going to www.muuf.org.
And also, you can give cash or checks, and to make in the memo line, UU Faith Action.
Good morning. It is such a pleasure to be with you this morning. So good to feel like I'm here in my second home, and so good to see so many of you in the person, so to speak, and to know that we have folks who are watching the stream as well. It is good to be in community in this new way as we find a new way. I don't have any milestones and passages that have been passed to me this morning, but I just wanted to check quickly to see if anyone had a milestone or passage that they really wanted to share this morning. If you do, we want to give you opportunity to do that. All righty. I invite you to join me in a spirit of prayer and meditation. Spirit of life. God of many traditions, known by many names and known by no name at all. The God of our understanding, the Spirit that moves amongst us. This morning, We are thinking about justice, and it is a hard day to do that. The headlines remind us for some in this society and not for all. We lift up those lives that are taken for granted, those lives that don't seem to have the same value. I pray earnestly that we will find a way through this moment to rediscover the values that are important and to work to make those a genuine reality for all people. Justice is something that our faith calls us desperately not only to believe in but to work for. But Spirit of Life, it is sometimes so very hard. And sometimes we are tired, and sometimes we are unsure of what to do next. Remind us, Spirit, that in those moments, the way forward is together. There are no easy answers. There are no shortcuts. But if there will ever be justice, true justice in this world, it will be because we, together as a community, find a way, even when it seems there is no way. Amen, and may it be so. I have two readings to share with you this morning. The first reading is from the Chandoga Upanishad, a major Hindu philosophical text that is incorporated in the Sama Veda. It deals with meditation and Brahman. Brahman is the ultimate reality that underlies all phenomena. This is an excerpt from Upanishad 6:10, verses 1 and 2. Those rivers belonging to the east run to the east, and those belonging to the west run to the west. Rising from the sea, they go back to it and become one with it. Just as when they reach the sea, they do not know their separate identities. I am this river, or I am that river. In the same way, all these beings, having come from Brahman, never know this. They never think, we have come from Brahman. Whatever they were before in the world, whether a tiger or lion or leopard or boar or bug or insect or flea or mosquito, they are born again. That which is the subtlest of all is the self of all this. It is the truth. It is the self that thou art. And the second reading is a particular favorite of mine. It is an excerpt from the song River of Dreams by Billy Joel. I'm not sure about a life after this. God knows I've never been a spiritual man. Baptized by the fire, I wade into the river that runs to the promised land. In the middle of the night, I go walking in my sleep through the desert of truth to the river so deep. We all end in the ocean. We all start in the streams. We're all carried along by the river of dreams in the middle of the night. Thank you so much. You know, I have to begin by saying what an absolute pleasure it is to be invited to be with you today. If there is anyone in the room who doesn't know who I am, my name is Charles Loflin, and I serve as the Executive Director of UU Faith Action New Jersey. But additionally, from September 2019 through June of 2020, I had the distinct privilege of serving as a ministerial intern here at the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. So I have to say, in a very tangible way, being here feels both familiar and comforting, but also a little bit different. The last time I was leading services from this pulpit, we certainly were not all wearing masks. You know, it's a little bit like gathering with extended family after being away for a long time, which, interestingly, for this week is something some of us may actually be doing, figuring out how to navigate that new reality as well. But this is my first time back in this space as a worship leader since the beginning of the COVID lockdown. I was trying to imagine how I would actually feel in this moment, and I wrote a note for myself here: stop and actually feel it. What is it like for me in this moment? What is it like for you? You know, COVID can have the effect of pushing everything together all at once, and it's very easy to just move through our lives without stopping and experiencing the moment. Sometimes because the moment is not exactly comfortable, and it's a reminder that this is not the world we had hoped for. But I genuinely believe that we should stop and experience it for what it is. Because despite this not being perhaps what we ideally wanted, we are blessed. We are blessed to be here. We are blessed to be together. So again, I am grateful for the opportunity to be with you in this space, as well as with those who are joining us virtually. And I will forever, for the rest of my ministerial career, be so grateful for the time that I had here at the fellowship. You know, for me, this holiday week is primarily a time for reflection and an opportunity to recognize and to actually give credence to the gratitude that is all around me. So today is a good beginning for that. I feel gratitude and I thank you. You know, one of the perks of being executive director of UU Faith Action New Jersey is that I have opportunities just like this to speak at the congregations that are part of our UUFANJ network. Today is an opportunity for me to say first and foremost, and please hear this because I sincerely mean it, first and foremost, I want to say thank you on behalf of the organization to each of you individually and to the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship collectively for your support and for your ongoing commitment to this important work of justice at the state legislative level. It is our Unitarian Universalist values, and particularly that work in the realm of advocacy for legislation, that directs much of the work of UU Faith Action. This is an opportunity for me to share something of the particulars of the work that we are doing, and hopefully to extend an invitation to you to be an even bigger part of this work. Now, in 2006, the UU congregation of Princeton surveyed its congregants to figure out what was important for them in terms of social justice. And one of the things that came out of that survey was the need for an organization, a project to establish the UU Legislative Ministries of New Jersey that became known as UULMNJ, and the organization that today is called UU Faith Action. From the very beginning, the organization was envisioned as a collaboration amongst all the New Jersey UU congregations. The organization would advocate for UU values in the New Jersey legislature. And by 2008, the organization had taken root with a two-pronged mission. The first was a ministry dedicated to education and research of social justice issues. And the second involved coordinating grassroots advocacy and establishing public policy via legislation in Trenton. We have reframed that work in a slightly new way, but those core values are still there. We say that there are three parts of the work that we do at UU Faith Action. There is education, there is advocacy, and there is mobilization. We believe that all three of those parts are essential for promoting the work of justice. Today, UU Faith Action is organized around task forces. So our separate task forces divide the work that we center within the organization. Our task forces there's a criminal justice reform task force, an environmental justice task force, the gun violence prevention task force, the immigration justice task force. Our newest task force is the reparations task force, and we have a reproductive justice task force. We also have a special caucus of youth that we refer to as FAIR, and that is an acronym that stands for the Faith Action Inclusivity Representatives. These are high school-aged youth, led by high school-aged youth, who are working to find a way of expressing their sense of social justice, and we're helping to make that happen. I'm pleased to say Nick actually was in the meeting that happened with the FAIR group this last Thursday, so I'm very excited to hear about that. And I hope there are opportunities to share this important opportunity for youth to get involved with social justice in the coming months. In 2017, the board of UU Faith Action adopted a revised mission statement, and I want to read it to you this morning because it really does, in a nutshell, say who we are. Grounded in our Unitarian Universalist faith, we are confronting systemic injustice and building a more compassionate society in New Jersey by educating ourselves and others on social and political issues, mobilizing individuals and congregations to act for justice, advocating for equitable and sustainable public policy. It is thanks to the ongoing participation and financial support of our 21 member congregations and of our individual donors that UU Faith Action provides both the advocacy and legislative leadership that make a real difference on issues of equity and justice, but also helps us build wider alliances between frontline communities, advocacy groups, legislators, and key coalitions across the state. Our vision statement says, we envision a New Jersey free from systemic oppression and greed, full of engaged people committed to each other, to our communities, and to the earth. That's quite a vision. And as I mentioned earlier, it is a vision that is sometimes difficult to hold on to because we do live in a broken world. You know, there are many folks in this room right now who have been not only part of Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, but have been part of UU Faith Action from its inception. And I have to give a special nod to Reverend Allison Miller, who has served on the board at UU Faith Action. Has been a huge proponent for the organization over the years. Now, I'm not going to foolishly attempt to name everyone who has been involved in UU Faith Action, because I would inevitably leave someone out, and that would not be my intent. But I wonder if we can play a little game together here. So let us take a moment, both here in the room and also if you're online, you can add this to the chat. I'd like you to raise your hand for just a moment to indicate if you have served as a UU Faith Action board member, a congregational liaison, a task force chair, or as a member of one of our task forces, either now or in the past. Would you raise your hand? Take a look around the room. That's a fairly large percentage of the people in this room right now. Now, I'm going to ask additionally, if you have participated in a UU Faith Action call to action, maybe you've received one of our emails that has urged you to contact your representative on a particular issue, or maybe you've participated in a letter writing campaign, or attended a rally, a march, or a protest. Perhaps you have attended one of our annual issues conferences, or our annual meeting, or our gala. If you have done any of those things, would you now raise your hand? Now look around the room now. So I was checking our database in preparation for this, and what I discovered is there are 110 registrants in our database who've indicated an affiliation with Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. That's a really strong number when you consider the total membership here at the fellowship. We are so grateful for those of you who have done that work. I thank you for what you have done and what you continue to do. And I do, at this moment, want to take a special moment to especially recognize someone from the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, and he happens to be in the room, Tom Moran, who's back there on the camera. You may not know this, Tom Moran is not only currently on the board of UU Faith Action, but he is serving as treasurer for the organization. And I have had the grand privilege of watching the dedication Tom has brought to this work, and it is phenomenal. He does the work of 10 people, I kid you not. Tom, I am so grateful for you, and thank you for everything that you do. And I want you, as a fellowship, to know that about Tom. And when you get an opportunity, thank him, because he so well represents not only the fellowship, but our larger Unitarian Universalist identity. So I believe that as an organization, we have a lot to be proud of. We played a major role in the cause of marriage equality in New Jersey. We have played a major role on gun violence prevention. We have among the strongest gun violence prevention statutes of any of the states, and much of that has to do with our GVP task force. We've also been movers on things like bail reform, reproductive health care, immigration justice, and one of the things I'm proudest of, last year the Environmental Cumulative Impacts Bill finally worked its way through. If you don't know about this piece of legislation, it's pretty amazing. We as a state in New Jersey are truly leading the way in this area. What that legislation requires is that anyone who's looking to build an additional facility that might add pollution into the air must by law do a study of the existing pollution in those areas. Because here's what happens. There are certain communities in New Jersey that get targeted as the ones where all the incinerators and all the waste disposal goes. And guess what? They are pretty identifiable because they are primarily black and brown communities, and they are in areas that are often economically underserved. We have spoken out strongly that we must not balance the need to take climate action on the backs of those communities who are already so marginalized. Justice requires that we honor our commitments and that equity and compassion be part of what we do. And you, as Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, have been an integral part of that history so far. And so it is good to acknowledge and to celebrate that work. But I also think it's good to ask some particular questions for where we are at this moment and at this time. So what does it mean right now in 2021, on the verge of 2022? What does it mean to say that we are working to confront systemic injustice and build a more compassionate society? Because it means something different in this time than maybe it even meant 2 years ago. How can we build on the strong foundation that has been laid and imagine possibilities and opportunities that exist for where we may yet go? Because, friends, let us be honest. Ours is a complicated time. One has to wonder if there has ever been a more polarized environment than the one in which we find ourselves. It divides not only political institutions, it divides our congregations, and it divides sometimes our families. And you better believe, I know that for some of us, this will be a difficult week, because while there may be great joy in being with loved ones who we have not seen for a while, those sometimes lead to difficult conversations. The headlines make it clear that there are imbalances and imperfections, to put it lightly, in our justice system. And there are dangerous fault lines at play. Now, I am sure that every time, every moment in history, that is true. But this is our time. This is our moment in history. And no one else is going to save us. That is what our Unitarian Universalist theology teaches us. We don't get saved by some great power from outside. If there is salvation to be had, and God knows we need it, it has to come from the people sitting next to you. It has to come from your own soul. There's the famous quote by Martin Luther King Jr. You probably all could quote it by memory. President Barack Obama was particularly fond of referring to this quote. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Did you know that Dr. Martin Luther King was in fact paraphrasing someone else with that quote? He's paraphrasing the Unitarian minister, Theodore Parker, who was a staunch abolitionist. And this is what Theodore Parker said in a sermon in 1853. And I invite you to listen carefully. I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. And from what I see, I am sure it bends towards justice. Now, King's version is, of course, far more effective rhetorically because it is so self-contained and simple, but the danger of that quotation is it can lead us to believe that justice is inevitable, that if we just get out of the way, it will happen. And folks, nothing could be further from the truth. Parker's full quote suggests a justice that is more ambiguous. How we define justice will make all the difference. So, when I consider again the UU Faith Action mission statement, grounded in our Unitarian Universalist faith, we are confronting systemic injustice and building a more compassionate society in New Jersey through education and mobilization and advocacy. Well, if that's the mission, then what does the work of justice look like in this context? What does it really look like? So when I go looking for a way of understanding this, perhaps this has something to do with the calling and the career that I've chosen for myself in this late stage. I find imagery to resonate, sometimes so much more than words do. The pictures often help tell the story. And that's why the reading from the Upanishads really resonates for me. So just to remind you, those rivers belonging to the east run to the east, and those belonging to the west run to the west. Rising from the sea, they go back to it and they become one with it. Just as when they reach the sea, they do not know their separate identities. I am this river, or I am that river. They have become part of the whole. Boy, that imagery, it suggests a strong relationship between the individual self that we in Western society get so hung up on and our collective responsibility, our collective existence. The individual rivers ultimately join with the sea. They join with the sea from which they originate in the first place, forming a grand circle. And I cannot help but think of that imagery when I read those words that are so precious to our faith, that we are part of, that there is an interconnected web of existence of which we are a part. The imagery of the rivers moving into the great sea, that feels to me like it is the very interconnected web that we're talking about. So I could wax poetical and metaphysical about this all day long, but I also think that imagery works in terms of justice, and it works in terms of thinking about the work of UU Faith Action New Jersey. In UU Faith Action New Jersey, we work in these task forces, and sometimes these task forces can feel like individual rivers. Sometimes they are fast flowing. Sometimes they are barely a stream looking for community. Sometimes there are specific goals and the river becomes mighty. Sometimes the river is blocked. Many find their way to UU Faith Action to join specific task forces because at some level it may speak to you individually. Perhaps your passion is environmental justice, and that is where you want to put your efforts. Or perhaps your passion is immigration justice, and you want to truly create a world that honors the dignity and the inherent worth and self-respect of all people. Perhaps your issue is reparations. Perhaps you want to do something finally about this long-standing problem we have in this country of not acknowledging the truth of our past. And there are, of course, critical social justice concerns for which UU Faith Action does not have a task force. We face the reality that our resources are limited. And to be faithful stewards of what has been entrusted to us, we must make decisions about where to put our efforts based on where we can make the most difference. And that is a moving target. Like rivers that sometimes merge, we may find that at times combining our efforts is the way to go. That the strength of 2 or 3 task forces working together will move us further towards the sea. And on occasion, we may find that a particular task force needs to become dormant, or perhaps cease to be entirely for a season. not unlike rivers that sometimes change their path. But this we know, we will work hard always to keep in mind that our task forces are all part of the ultimate goal of confronting systemic injustice and bending the moral arc of the universe. And we have committed that every one of our task forces are actively doing the work to dismantle racism and all forms of oppression. You know, that metaphor also applies to our coalition partners. We are learning that we cannot do this work alone, and that in the work of justice, we must intentionally center those voices who are most impacted by this work. That means sometimes we need to take our lead from other organizations, often those led by those with marginalized identities, because they have lived it. Our job sometimes is to be an ally. Think of all the tributaries that flow into the rivers, making it stronger. Sometimes we are not called to be the river, sometimes we are called to be the tributary. Some of the coalition partners with which we collaborate, and I'm just naming a few of them here, there are so many, but the ACLU of New Jersey, the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, New Jersey Prison Justice Watch, Faith in New Jersey, Thrive New Jersey, National Council of Jewish Women, Wind of the Spirit, Clean Water Action, the Ironbound Community Corporation, First Friends of New Jersey, and that's just a few. We also partner with UU organizations, such as the Coalition of UU State Action Networks, of which we are a member organization. We currently have 25 states that have an organization akin to UU Faith Action, and we meet to work together, to learn from one another. Yes, we are moving towards the ocean of justice, but there are many rivers that will help us reach the sea. And finally, I think our relationship with New Jersey UU congregations meets this metaphor. Because Morristown UU Fellowship and our other UU congregations in the state of New Jersey are like rivers. They each have their own life, their own vitality, their own energy. They are all moving towards the sea of justice, sometimes fast, sometimes painfully slow, but we are in it together. We strive at UU Faith Action to be a resource to our congregations. We want to do what we can to amplify the social justice work that you are doing locally. So we encourage our congregations to submit their social justice activities, for example, to our community calendar on our website. We want to lift up the work that you're doing because it is important. We also help provide resources such as suggested reading materials and curricula to support your efforts. We also encourage each of our congregations to designate at least one congregational liaison who joins our monthly, or is invited to join our monthly liaison meeting. That facilitates communication so that we can know what is happening in the congregations, and the congregations can know more about what is happening at UU Faith Action. Toby Tyler, who's also in the room, is the UU Faith Action liaison. You know what? I bet Toby Tyler would appreciate a little help. I'm guessing that if you were to walk up to Toby and say, you know what, I think I might be able to help out and serve as a liaison, we would always welcome your input. But see, all of that is to say that I envision UU Faith Action and the social justice work that we are doing, that what our time calls us to be is wide as the river and deep as the ocean. That it is in partnership and coalition that our strength will be found, and when we are working together, we will find a sea of justice so deep if we can only hold on. course, this work depends on financial support of our congregations and of our individual donors, and we are so grateful for the dedicated offering that you took up today. We are committed to being good stewards of your generosity. Everything you give, we will carefully consider and make sure that we are doing our best. So, if you want to find out more about our task forces, maybe being a liaison, maybe you have interest in serving on the UU Faith Action Board of Trustees, please don't hesitate to reach out. One way you can do that is by going to our website, which is at uufaithaction.org, and you can make sure that you are on our mailing list there. In the upper left corner of the website, you can sign up for our email alerts. That way you'll receive our monthly newsletter and also education alerts and action alerts when there is activity that needs to be taken. And there is a bunch of activity coming up. We happen to be in a lame duck session, which means that our legislature just went through an election, and some of those folks were voted out of office. And so they will remain in office, the current legislative body, until the beginning of January, or a couple weeks into January. This is a time when some legislation may move, and we have particular legislation that all of our task forces are looking for. So please join our mailing list. You'll get information. It's so easy. It's so easy. Like, all you have to do is click a button, give us your address, and it will send an email to your representative, letting them know that you believe in the work of justice and you want your UU values reflected in the work of the state. I'm also happy to answer any questions that you may have, either during the coffee hour, or even I'm going to try and join the online coffee hour later today too. But always, please consider me a resource. Again, thank you for the opportunity of being here this morning. It was an absolute pleasure. May justice roll down like waters. Let that truly, truly be our prayer. Blessed be.
We are gentle and we give hope, and we are singing.
Friends, our closing words are from Israel Buffardi, "The Struggle Continues." The road that lies ahead of us is a long one, and the pace of progress will sometimes feel glacially slow. Never forget that glaciers over time can carve out grand canyons and great lakes. Moving tectonic plates can rise up mountains over millennia, or they can explode awe-inspiring volcanoes in milliseconds. Our commitment to love and justice can do the same. Blessed be, go in peace.